The Festival of Coins is brought to you in partnership with the Numismatic Guarantee Corporation and the Royal Mint Museum.
Okay, so welcome to this live interview with Chris Barker from the Royal Mint Museum. We're really glad to have Chris here today as part of the Festival of Coins, and we'll be just discussing Chris's career at the museum, his role, that kind of thing. So Chris, welcome along. Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
along.
Pleasure.
I'd like to start, if okay with you, just talking a bit about your career and how you became interested in coins in the first place.
Yeah, of course. It's accidental, really, that I ended up down in the museum, the Royal Mint Museum. It was never an intention of mine to actually go out there and find a career with coins. And I did a history undergraduate and worked for a couple of years, and then I went back and did a master's in heritage management. And when I finished that, I was sort of looking for a heritage-based job, and the one in Cardiff at the museum came up, and had a go at it and applying for it, and I got it. And I'd never studied coins before in my life, never studied numismatics in any way, shape, or form before I came down here. My interest was history and heritage, and I started 10 years ago next February, so I'm still here. So clearly, it's held my interest over that time.
Excellent. And do you think, you say you didn't study coins or anything, but you did history? Obviously, there's a link between coins and history. Do you think did you realize how much history there is in coins?
Yeah, I mean, from the history that I studied, we touched at times on coinage generally, but it was only really when I got down here that you start to really, or at least myself personally anyway, I started to see coins as the fantastic sources that they are of history. The one that I always like and use as a good example is the coinage of the Commonwealth during after the Civil War. We got this very heraldic coinage, all these principles of the Commonwealth and sweeping away all the popery, and you disappear all the Latin inscriptions of the coinage that's previously been on there. You've got the English on there, and then you contrast that with the start of the Commonwealth. What happens when Cromwell becomes effectively a military dictator, and you see Cromwell on there as this almost Roman emperor-esque figure, and on the reverse you've got this crowned arms with Cromwell's arms in the center, and you're thinking particularly those two really do demonstrate the moment of time, Commonwealth being the principles of the Commonwealth, and then with Cromwell coming to power and effectively being king in all but name, and using coins to read history and as sources of history, I think is something that, having gone through a history degree, it's probably not brought to the fore as much as it could be, because they really do tell a different story to what you get sometimes in texts.
Yes, yeah. Well, that was one of my questions. We've kind of come onto it already. Is do you think coins are fully appreciated in the academic world, I guess, of history, but also just generally, people are so interested in history and heritage, that do they often pick up on the coins?
I think they have. The coinage seems to fit into this niche when it's come into the academic world of being the ancient world. Coinage is often referred to back then, and you often get them brought up when they're talking about the ancient world, Rome and Greece, and they're used as sources quite regularly. But then, because written sources become more prevalent as you're going through history, and the Middle Ages, they seem to just ditch the coinage and revert to texts. Not all the time, but I do think they get overlooked, certainly in the later periods and the early modern and the more modern periods. There's an awful lot there that you can take from them that isn't really fed into contemporary historical thought. And I think it's a shame, because they're used as such a wonderful resource for ancient and Roman and Greek history, and then it does feel like there's almost this, we'll ditch that now. We've got text, we've got written sources, we've got archaeology, we don't need to bother with the coinage. So I would like to see them used more widely. And one of the things we would like to do, certainly in the museum, is encourage students of the early modern and the more modern periods to study coinage more generally and think about what you can get out of that from a history perspective.
Excellent. Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, certainly with ancient coinage, immediately you think of the history and the stories and the propaganda. But interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you started at the Royal Mint Museum, was there a particular coin or a story that captured your imagination, kind of convinced you that you were in the right place?
I think there was a couple of things when I started that really sort of captured my attention. Firstly, when my first week here, February 2012, the first week that I came down here, one of the first things I saw in the museum was the Olympic medals, because this is prior to the 2012 Olympics. Nothing's been released yet. And I came to the museum. One of the first things I got to handle and look at was the Olympic medals, which were going to be issued that summer. And that was a real wow moment for me. Really spectacular. And then another thing that really got me and captured my attention was when I had a tour of the collection given to me by Graham Dyer, who's been at the museum for an awfully long time and well known in the numismatic world, and he just really brought it to life for me, the stories and the history and that captured my imagination, and seeing the objects as well and appreciating their beauty. Gold nobles, one of the first things I remember looking at and thinking, wow, these are stunning objects, and it's gone on from there, really.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so I wonder if you could tell us a bit about your kind of day-to-day role at the museum, what you kind of get up to, and yeah, just your day-to-day role.
It's very varied, and yet again, that's another thing which I enjoy about it, is that because of primarily what I do is I provide information, whether that's information to the public or whether that's information to my colleagues within the Royal Mint. So from the public side of things, we're dealing with lots of inquiries. We get coins sent in for examination rather. So that's all very varied, because the public ask all sorts of different questions, and that will take you down routes and avenues that you might never have explored before. Yet again, something that's brilliant to pick up on research and concepts you haven't looked at even in 10 years of being here.
Yeah.
And then there's the mint side of things, where you're helping support the mint in its business activities. So particularly when it comes to developing copy on numismatic themes. So when they're launching the sovereign every year, they'll develop copy, and I'll be involved in helping shape what that copy might look like, and giving them ideas for what could go in there, and thinking, well, it's 2021, have you thought about X anniversary or this anniversary? So it's using and applying that numismatic knowledge that I have to help out from a business perspective as well. So you've got two very slightly different things going on there, and it's that mix of the commercial and the more pure museum, I suppose, that are driven day to day. And on a final point, if I may, that there's the other side that we're involved with in the museum, which is coin design, which is not something people expect. But
okay.
the museum is heavily involved in the current coin design process. So I help prepare papers for the Royal Mint Advisory Committee, which decides on new coins and medal designs to the UK. And I also do the legislative legwork of that as well afterwards. So I prepare submission documents to the Chancellor and to the Palace for approval of those designs. So being involved in the current and contemporary side of the design process is fascinating. And I love to see the new artwork as it comes through.
Excellent. So that's you're kind of the part of the history of the Royal Mint, then, aren't you? If you're involved in that such an official process.
Yeah, and there is a lot of rationale behind it from our perspective, because by being involved in that, it means that we can then archive the artwork and the plaster models and the modelling more generally as soon as the committee's finished with it, and it can find its way down into our library for future reference. And we've got a fantastic collection of artwork down there, stretching back to sort of the late 19th century. And what we're trying to do is sort of that custodian role, adding to it for the next generation of people like myself who will be doing this in 30, 40 years time to help tell the story of now, really.
Excellent. Do you think you or anyone at the museum influences the actual design of a particular coin? I mean, I guess not maybe the Peter Rabbit ones or something like that, but
we offer, we try in our small way to help when there is numismatically relevant themes. So if there's something that will crop up, which obviously would clearly be a numismatic illogical from a numismatic perspective, that's where we'd chip in, and we'd say, this doesn't work, or what do you mean that anniversary? That's the anniversary you're celebrating. It actually isn't an anniversary. The real anniversary is X. So that's really our role. It's providing that expertise and advice to help shape and inform, really.
Yeah.
I wish I could say I've got the power to say, oh, I really like that. That's the one I want. But
Yeah.
it's much more of a helping out role, to be honest, than an advice role.
Okay, so we're not going to see your face on a coin anytime soon.
I don't think the public would want that.
Oh well, you never know. Don't know. So out of all those roles, what do you particularly enjoy? What aspects of your work do you think you enjoy the most?
I still enjoy the research. I mean, I did history because I love the subject, and I love researching and writing about the subject. And even now, all those years after doing the undergraduate, it's still something I really enjoy. And one of the things that really gives me a buzz is when I do get a chance to go down to the National Archives and research a new topic. And I've been, recently working on studying the post-war sovereign story. So why sovereigns started coming to be struck again after the Second World War, and getting down to Kew and getting to grips with some of the contemporary documents down there, and writing that up and giving the talk to the British Numismatic Society I did a couple of months ago on that. That was brilliant, and I still enjoy that. I still love that.
Excellent. Okay. And are there any presumably you help with the exhibitions at the museum and deliver talks, that kind of thing. Are there any that you've worked on that particularly stick in your memory? Any kind of stories or aspects of coins that really kind of struck you?
The exhibition side is I'm involved loosely in that. There's my colleague Abigail Kenvin who does with a lot of the exhibitions work, and a really good one that we did that really never saw the light of day, unfortunately, was on war and coinage. That was espionage and war and coinage, which was due to run last year. So it opened about 2 weeks before COVID hit. We put all this effort and time into it, and then it was open for 2 weeks and nobody saw it because the RME was closed for most of the time it was running. But that was a great exhibition, and with regards to talks, I've been very fortunate as to some of the places I've been able to give talks by being connected with the Mint. And I really enjoyed a few years ago when I gave a talk at the V&A as part of the V&A Lates program, and we were there in the after hours and talking to these people as they were coming through as part of their Lates program in relation to the launch of the new £1 coin a few years ago. That was an excellent one. And another personal highlight was after hours at Westminster Abbey. There was no one else around. There was just a small group of Mint customers, and I got to give a talk there. And that was seeing the Abbey pretty much deserted was incredible. So you do get those perks, as it were, of the role by being here.
Excellent. That sounds great. Okay, so if moving on to the museum, what do you think the museum offers to coin collectors specifically if they come along or they come to your website?
We're currently trying to make ourselves more accessible, and that's really sort of what we've been the direction of travel that we've been working on over the last few years. Because even as the museum itself has been around since 1816, but as a modern independent charity, we've only been around for about 10-12 years now. And what we're trying to do is scan more documents and put them online. So in the coming weeks, not months, weeks, we will be putting online the digitized annual reports of the Royal Mint. So from 1870 through to 1976, they'll all be available for people to look through. Fantastic resource and searchable, which is brilliant from our point of view as well, from a research perspective. So you can just pop in key terms. And in line with that, we're also working in the background, and have been for a little while now, on putting the collection online. So photographing the coins, producing all the records, and getting those online. And it's an awful lot of work to go from nothing with thousands and thousands of coins to getting them all photographed, getting all the collection work in order. And those things are just starting to bear fruit after many years of effort. But that said, we still would encourage researchers to come and visit us. Get in touch if you want to come down. We will do what we can to help you. We can't always touch on all the subjects because of the nature of the collection. But certainly for the modern coinage, from our point of view, 1660s onwards, if people have research inquiries and research questions, get in touch. And if we've got things in the collection that you want to see, we can arrange times for people to come in. We're only just really starting to get back into the swing of that post-COVID. We've yet to have proper researchers in yet, but it will be happening again. So for all those listening and all those involved in research, do get in touch.
Excellent. Okay. And down there, you've got the Royal Mint experience, haven't you? And the museum. Are they kind of interlinked? Is that all one thing?
They are. Yeah, it's a slightly long tale to explain, but the Royal Mint experience is run by the Royal Mint, and where we are involved, because the museum and the Mint, believe it or not, are actually two separate entities. So you've got the Mint PLC that actually makes the coins and the money, quite literally, and the Royal Mint Museum, which is a separate charitable entity. We think of us as almost as little and big brother, really, and that will give you an idea. So the Royal Mint experience is run by the Royal Mint, but everything that's in the exhibition space is provided by the Royal Mint Museum. So we deal with the exhibition side of things in the exhibition area, and we will update that and add to it. So there's a link through there in terms of us, collaborating and working together, even though we don't run the Royal Mint experience directly. But it has been fantastic for us as a museum because it gives us a showcase, something we previously never had. People can actually come and see what we've got in the collection, even if it's just a small part of it at the moment.
So has that, dramatically changed I guess it's changed how many people know about the museum, how many people see the items in there?
Yeah, it definitely has. Yeah, it's changed how we engage with the public as well, because previously you're shut behind 2 layers of barbed wire. People can't get onto the site. Now you've got somewhere where the public can really come, and prior to COVID anyway, you get people asking questions, and we could just wander down. We were literally next door to the Royal Mint experience, so we could wander across and speak to people and talk to them. And it's a two-way dynamic. That is the great thing about inquiries, is that sometimes the public will give you information that you don't know, and you can give them information that they don't know. So that's part of the reason why we do encourage people to get in touch, because they can sometimes give us just as much as we can give them, really, in terms of information.
Yeah, that certainly strikes a chord with me. And we've got a magazine and a website. It's often the readers that are telling me what's what. So that's great. And do you get a lot of inquiries from the public? And what kind of thing do people ask? Is it?
At the moment, we're dealing with roughly about 100, 150 inquiries a month. From the public, so we get quite a few. And that can range, it's as broad as the day is long. It can range from the basics of, I've found this coin, what is it? And you get a picture of some random coin, through to much more nitty-gritty, detailed inquiries that require research. There's one that springs to mind about I think it was an 1826 crown. I think it was a frosted crown or something along the lines, that was reputed to have been shown at the Great Exhibition in 1851. And they were asking, can you provide any basis for this, any information to back this up? And admittedly, we couldn't say hand on heart we could, but we were able to go through with the person in question what we did know about it, and provide them with some information. And that was required quite a bit of digging down in what we've got downstairs in our library, to pull that out. So it's a very, very broad spectrum of inquiries, from the detailed research through to sometimes, what is this coin, and is this an error? Which is, we do get quite a few of those, admittedly. Is this an error coin? Most of them are not, but there we are.
Yeah, of course. Okay, and in the collection itself at the museum, am I right in saying there's hundreds of thousands of coins?
Yeah, I think we've certainly got well in excess of 100,000 coins, and that's not including the tooling, the plaster models, electrotypes. We've got a library downstairs, which is a very distinct numismatic library, some very, very old books from which came across from the Sarah Sophia Banks collection. So I think the earliest books we've got in there is a 17th century Dutch merchant's book. So gives you an idea of the breadth of what we have here. It's huge. It's a vast collection, and you've got some very big bits of kit, old machinery that's been used in the mint in time. So we've got quite a wide scope, and people should certainly not think it's just coins, because there's an awful lot else that goes into what we've got in the collection.
Yeah, and I think a question that was touched on in your other video, which I mentioned at the end, was it's not just British coins either,
It's
is
not.
it?
No, that's a very good point. I should have made myself. It's whatever the mint has been doing. So we are chart the Royal Mint's activity. We're primarily historians of the Royal Mint. So we try to tell that story. And because the Royal Mint has produced overseas coinage for many, many countries over its long history, we have a vast overseas collection as well. And that extends through to tooling as well, and plaster models and artwork. So if the Mint has made it, we believe we should be in a position to tell the story of that coinage, but also help researchers with what they might be doing to look into the subject matter.
Yeah, and does that mean you get many inquiries from people overseas?
Yeah, we do quite regularly. It's not as many as people obviously in Britain, but we still get a good supply of overseas inquiries coming in. Trying to think of any recent ones that are of note, but there's quite a few people that do get in touch. I think it was a researcher relatively recently who was looking at seals, colonial seals, because the Mint has been involved with seal production on and off over its history, and we've got a very good collection of seals. So he was doing some research into colonial seals from I think it was the 17th and 18th century, which we got some examples of. So yet again, it's a very broad spectrum of inquiries that we receive.
Excellent. Okay, and there's also VIP tours at the museum, is that right? Yeah, can you tell us a bit about those?
So those are run through the Royal Mint experience, but it will allow people to actually come into the museum building proper, and so into the back room, the collection room, as it were, where myself or one of my colleagues will give them a glimpse of the collection, as it were. We'll spend an hour with them in the collection and going through the story of the British coinage or the coinage more generally, and we'll showcase what we have here. The only thing I would say at the moment is we're not quite back to where we were pre-COVID yet in getting people into the museum. A small air-conditioned room is not great from COVID perspective, but it certainly is the intention to get people back in there, and that is what will form part of the VIP experience. In addition to that, they go around site, and it's a long day. There's a lot of walking involved, but it's a fascinating day. You get to see behind the scenes of tool making and the the commemorative coin production, as well as circulating coin production. You see an awful lot of the site, and as it's a 34-acre site, that explains why there's a lot of walking.
Yeah.
So
okay, so how just coming back to that kind of international aspect and I guess the British Empire, how do you think the world kind of views British coinage and the Royal Mint?
The Mint itself, I think, the Mint today obviously faces a lot of challenges. No one can say that the circulating coinage hasn't declined. I mean, it's still obviously there. There still is demand, but it has dropped over the last 10 years, certainly whilst I've been here. So there are challenges from that perspective. But one of the things the Mint is always constantly trying to do, despite that, is to try and maintain quality of what it's producing in terms of design, particularly. And I think that does set us apart to a degree from some of the coinages overseas. We've always tried to get high quality designs, and that is certainly a role that the Royal Mint Advisory Committee has fulfilled over its nearly a century, is trying to keep that standard high. And it's the same with production, is that we've always tried to maintain high standards. And that isn't always easy when it comes to particularly circulating coin, when you're facing increased pressures, particularly from an overseas market. So I'd hope that there is a view of the Mint as for something that produces quality design, and something that we do try to keep as high as possible, despite all of the pressures that we face in the modern world. So that's hopefully something that the public and more generally the world would see.
And do you think just historically, do you think British coinage has kind of influenced other coins in the world, other mints?
I certainly in the more modern period, and I think that is more of it's a legacy to some degree of empire. You can't have you can't write out of history what happened in the 19th and early 20th century with the empire. It certainly, for good or bad, influenced large parts of the world for a long, long time. And take, for example, the sovereign, the modern sovereign, when it was preeminent around the globe in the 19th century, the equivalent of this sort of American Express card of its day. You could toddle off to whatever part of the globe and people would know that they could trade their sovereigns for goods and services. And that element of it, certainly you see echoes of it when countries move away from Britain, and you get the decolonization process, countries developing their own gold coinages, often initially in some sort of reference to the sovereign in one way or another, just because of that sheer influence that it had, and it being such an important part of the world's coinage. That was, from a personal perspective, when I was doing the research about the sovereign after the Second World War, it was something that staggered me, just its sheer hold, even in the 1940s and 1950s, that it had on certain areas of the world. Greece, for example, in the massive economic crisis it had after the Second World War from 45 through to about 47, millions of sovereigns were being pumped in to Greece by the British to prop up the Greek economy.
Yeah.
And you're thinking, it's crazy that this British gold coin is effectively propping up the Greek economy post Second World War, and it explains why there are still so many sovereigns in Greece even now. So there's that legacy that's still there, and it's not so much the Royal Mint shaping that; it's more of a question of British history, if that makes sense, shaping it, and the Mint being one of these great institutions of the British world, which has played its part in the history of Britain and more widely the world.
That's so interesting. And just going forward then, what do you think the future holds for the Royal Mint, and perhaps more so just coinage in general?
It's an interesting one. It's hard to predict the future, always is, but I certainly think from a circulating perspective, as I mentioned, that there are challenges out there. I'd be lying if I said that people today are not using their cards more, particularly with COVID. It's happened, and certainly there are challenges from a circulating perspective, and when we know that's the case. That said, people are still using coins. There's surveys done prior to COVID did show that there was still strong demand for coinage use, even though it had dropped. And there is still a strong demand from a collector perspective for coins, from a proof perspective. There's an active market out there. So I certainly think from a commemorative point of view, coins have and do play a role in commemorating important British events or events more generally. How the economy will shape up and respond to COVID and the world more generally it's a tricky one to say. I still think that's far too early to offer an opinion on that. But you don't want to, abandoning coinage would be, I think, a mistake, just because there are still people who rely on it, and it's still an important part of, for some people anyway, a very, very important part of their day-to-day activities. So I'd like to think that it's still, in the medium term, certainly got a strong place in Britain.
Absolutely. Okay, and just one final question, Chris. Do you collect coins yourself?
Other than occasionally putting to the side 50p's from my change, not really. And the reason for that is because of it would probably be a huge conflict of interest having such a vastly impressive coin collection, which I go to work with, and then trying to compete with that at home. Well, I couldn't, there's no way on God's green earth I could ever have an Edward VIII coin collection. So that is partly the reason why I don't have a coin collection. It's that I already work with such an amazing one that I see daily. I just could never, ever, match that in a million years.
No, absolutely. So is there a particular period or type of coin that you kind of have a soft spot for within the collection?
I think it's probably more of a question of, I'm trying to think now, what would be. I do find a particularly fascinating period is, and I mentioned it earlier, the reign of Charles I through the Commonwealth, Cromwell, and into Charles II's period. strictly speaking, it's not our area of expertise as such, because we claim expertise as a museum from the 1660s onwards and the introduction of the screw press. That said, we still have coins from that era, and I find those particularly fascinating, and that's probably my history background coming out there. And I just think it's brilliant to look at some of the coinage from that period and see the vast degree of changes that goes on more generally. And that key changeover from hammered coinage to machine coinage with the introduction of the screw press, it's an interesting period, and to see what happens there and that introduction of a modern coinage, really. So that's probably a weakness of mine when it comes to talking to people about the collection, I'd say.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, well, we do have a coin of the day from the Royal Mint Museum on the website throughout the Festival of Coins, so do have a look at that, everyone. And also Chris and his colleague David Mason have already answered some of your questions on a video. We'll be putting that live on Friday, next Friday, so you can have a look at that. There's some more questions and answers with them there. So Chris, thanks so much for your time today.
Pleasure.
Really interesting, and good luck with the next 10 years at the museum.
Thank you.
And also with the good luck with all the post-COVID things, and I'm sure we'll all keep an eye on the website, but people can go to the museum now. That's right, isn't it?
The Royal Mint experience is open. People can visit, and yet again, if people have questions, I'd encourage them to go to the museum's website and ask those questions of us. We're back in the museum now. We're trying as best we can to answer people's questions as well as we can, as quickly as we can. So get in touch is the main thing. And if you are in South Wales, come and visit the experience.
Brilliant. Yeah, I think I'm going to come next time I'm in that area. Definitely. Sounds great. So yeah, thanks so much, Chris, for your time, and we'll speak soon.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Don't miss the